The massive Zephyrian battleship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a predator stalking prey. Its hull gleamed with biometallic scales that shifted colors, mimicking the appearance of their homeworld's apex predator. Ambassador Krelvash stood on the bridge, his forearms crossed in satisfaction as he gazed down at the blue planet below. Such a small world, he rumbled to his second-in-command, Thex Nari. These humans have spread across 7 star systems, yet they originated from this tiny sphere. How amusing. Thex Nari's elongated snout twitched with anticipation. The Zephyrians resembled massive wolves crossed with ancient dragons, standing nearly 9 feet tall on their hind legs. Their species had dominated their sector of the galaxy for millennia, conquering world after world through a combination of superior technology and psychological warfare. The intelligence reports suggest they form emotional attachments to inferior species, Thex Nari replied, her voice carrying the distinctive growl of their people. They keep small creatures as companions, even allowing them into their dwellings. Krelvash's lips curled back, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. Weakness disguised as sentiment. This will make their submission even sweeter. He activated the ship's communication array, sending a message to the human authorities below. People of Earth, we are the Zephyrian Dominion. Your species has attracted our attention through your rapid expansion. You will send your finest representative to negotiate your planet's integration into our empire. The response came within hours. A single human would meet them at coordinates in what the humans called Central Park in their primary city. Krelvash was intrigued by their choice of location. An open space surrounded by towering structures, perfect for demonstrating power. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the designated clearing, her hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. As Earth's leading xenobiologist and diplomat, she had volunteered for first contact protocols years ago, never imagining it would involve potential subjugation. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath her boots as she waited. The Zephyrian shuttle landed with surprising grace for its imposing size. Steam hissed from its landing thrusters as the boarding ramp descended. Krelvash emerged first, his massive form casting a long shadow across the grass. His deep blue fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in complex rhythms, a display meant to intimidate lesser species. I am Ambassador Krelvash of the Zephyrian Dominion, his voice boomed across the park. You will address me as Supreme Alpha as befits my station. Sarah stepped forward, maintaining eye contact despite every instinct screaming at her to submit to the obvious predator before her. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Government. We appreciate your visit, Ambassador. The massive alien's eyes narrowed at her failure to use his preferred title. Your species' reputation for defiance precedes you, human. But defiance is a luxury you can no longer afford. He gestured with one of his forearms, and Thex Nari approached carrying what appeared to be a containment unit. Before we discuss terms, Krelvash continued, we have prepared a demonstration of why resistance is futile. Every species in our domain learns to respect Zephyrian superiority through understanding our place as apex predators. The containment unit hummed as its sides became transparent. Inside paced a creature that made Sarah's breath catch. It was massive, easily the size of a large horse, but built like a wolf. Its fur was midnight black, shot through with veins of silver, and its eyes glowed with an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. The creature's presence radiated danger so profound that birds fell silent in the surrounding trees. Behold the Vorthak, Krelvash announced with obvious pride, the deadliest predator our homeworld has ever produced. A single Vorthak can hunt and kill creatures 10 times its size. Their pack intelligence is so advanced they have been known to set traps for prey that take weeks to spring. Even we Zephyrians, the undisputed rulers of our world, give them respectful distance. The creature in the containment unit fixed its glowing eyes on Sarah, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Its gaze seemed to pierce through her, evaluating her as either predator or prey. The air itself seemed to thicken with menace. This particular Vorthak, Krelvash continued, has been conditioned to respond to human scent. When we release it, you will understand the futility of opposing beings who command such creatures. Your terror will be complete, and then we can discuss reasonable terms for your world's surrender. Sarah's mind raced. She had studied countless predator species in her career, but this creature was beyond anything in Earth's fossil record or current ecosystem. Its very presence seemed to trigger primal fears buried deep in human DNA. "I see you understand now," Dexnari said, noting Sarah's pale complexion. "The Vorthak has that effect on all intelligent species. Even we who raised it feel the stirring of ancient fears in its presence." But Sarah was thinking of something else entirely. In her jacket pocket, she carried a photo of her German shepherd Max, who had passed away just 3 months earlier. She thought of his loyalty, his intelligence, his capacity for both protection and companionship. An idea began to form, dangerous and possibly foolish, but it was all she had. "You're right," she said quietly, surprising the aliens with her calm tone. "This creature is magnificent. But I have a question before you proceed with your demonstration." Krelvash's head tilted, intrigued despite himself. "Speak." "On our world, we have creatures that share some similarities with your Vorthak. We call them wolves and dogs. We've learned that even the most dangerous predator can recognize certain qualities in another species. May I approach the containment unit?" The two Zephyrians exchanged glances. Dexnari's snout wrinkled in confusion. "You wish to move closer to certain death?" "Sometimes," Sarah said, stepping forward despite her racing heart. "Understanding comes through proximity, not distance." She walked slowly toward the containment unit, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The Vorthak's eyes tracked her approach, its massive head tilting slightly as if puzzled by her behavior. Most prey species fled or cowered when confronted with its presence. This small human was doing neither. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything the Zephyrians believed about human nature, and everything humans thought they knew about their place in the cosmic order. Sarah moved with measured steps toward the containment unit, her breathing controlled despite the fear coursing through her veins. The Vorthak's glowing eyes followed every movement, its massive head tracking her approach like a predator calculating the perfect moment to strike. Behind her, she could hear the confused murmurs of the Zephyrian delegation. "The human has lost her mind," Dexnari whispered to Krelvash. "No intelligent species approaches a Vorthak willingly. This confirms their reputation for irrational behavior." But Krelvash was studying Sarah's movements more carefully. There was something in her posture, in the way she held her hands, that didn't match typical prey behavior. She wasn't cowering or fleeing, but neither was she displaying the aggressive dominance tactics they had seen from other warrior species. As Sarah drew within 10 feet of the containment unit, the Vorthak's behavior began to change. Its ears, which had been pressed forward in a hunting stance, shifted slightly. The creature's massive head tilted further, and for a moment, the predatory intensity in its eyes seemed to flicker with something else: curiosity. Sarah stopped just outside the energy field that contained the creature. At this distance, she could see the intricate patterns in its silver-streaked fur, the intelligence burning in those ethereal eyes, and the raw power contained in its muscular frame. But she also noticed something the Zephyrians had missed in their descriptions. The creature's body language carried subtle signs of stress and isolation. "Beautiful," she whispered, just loud enough for her words to carry to the alien observers. "You're magnificent, aren't you? But you're not where you belong." The Vorthak's head tilted further and its ears swiveled toward her voice. Its nostrils flared as it took in her scent, analyzing the complex chemical signals humans unconsciously broadcast. Sarah slowly lowered herself into a crouch, reducing her height and making herself appear less threatening. "I know what it's like to be far from home," she continued in the same gentle tone she had once used with injured animals in her research. "To be surrounded by beings who see you only as a tool or a weapon, never as an individual with your own needs and feelings." Behind her, Krelvash stepped forward. "What is she doing?" he demanded. "This is not how prey species behave in the presence of an apex predator." Sarah ignored the alien's confusion, focusing entirely on the creature before her. Years of working with Earth's predators had taught her that most dangerous animals were only aggressive when they felt threatened or cornered. This magnificent creature had been taken from its homeworld, transported across space, and displayed as a weapon. Despite its fearsome capabilities, it was as much a victim as a threat. The Vorthak moved closer to the edge of its containment field, bringing its massive head within inches of where Sarah crouched. This close, she could see the individual whiskers that twitched as it analyzed her scent, could feel the heat radiating from its body through the energy barrier. Any normal person would have fled in terror. Instead, Sarah slowly extended her hand palm up toward the field boundary. I can't touch you through this barrier, she said softly. But I want you to know I see you. Not just a weapon or a monster, but you. The Vorthak's response shocked everyone present. The massive predator lowered its head toward Sarah's outstretched hand, pressing its nose as close to the energy field as possible without touching it. Its eyes, which had blazed with predatory intensity moments before, now held something that looked remarkably like recognition. Thexnari's voice cracked with disbelief. The Vorthak is responding to her. This is impossible. They only respond to pack hierarchy established through combat dominance. But Sarah was remembering something else, her research into pack behavior among Earth's social predators. Wolves didn't only respond to dominance, they also recognized and respected genuine care and understanding. The most successful wolf handlers weren't those who tried to dominate the animals, but those who learned to communicate within the wolf's own social framework. You miss your pack, don't you? Sarah murmured to the Vorthak. These aliens may have raised you, but they never understood what you really needed. You're not just a weapon, you're a social creature forced into isolation. The great creature's response was extraordinary. It settled into a lying position, bringing its massive head down to Sarah's level. Its tail, which had been held rigid with tension, relaxed slightly. Most remarkably, it began to emit a low, rumbling sound, not a growl of aggression, but something that sounded almost like purring. Krelvash was now openly staring at the scene before him. In all his years of working with Vorthaks, he had never seen one display such behavior toward a member of another species. These creatures were bred and trained for warfare, conditioned to see all non-Zephyrians as either threats or prey. Yet here was their most prized specimen, acting like a domesticated pet. This changes nothing, he announced, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The demonstration will proceed. The human's strange behavior only delays the inevitable. Sarah heard the ambassador's words but didn't turn away from the Vorthak. Instead, she began to speak in the same gentle tone, but now directing her words toward the alien delegation. You've made an error in your assessment of both humans and this magnificent creature, she said. You see only predator and prey because that's how your species views the universe. But relationships between intelligent species, and yes, I believe your Vorthak is far more intelligent than you've realized, can be much more complex. She slowly stood, keeping her hand extended toward the containment field. The Vorthak's eyes tracked her movement, but instead of resuming a hunting stance, it remained in its relaxed position, watching her with obvious interest. On our world, we learned long ago that the strongest partnerships aren't built on domination, but on mutual respect and understanding. We've formed bonds with our own predators that have transformed both species. Our dogs are descended from wolves that chose to work with us rather than against us. That choice made both our species stronger. The implication of her words hung heavy in the autumn air. The Zephyrians had brought their ultimate predator to demonstrate human helplessness, but instead, they were witnessing something that challenged their fundamental understanding of interspecies relations. Thexnari moved closer to Krelvash, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Supreme Alpha, this is unprecedented. The Vorthak has never displayed such behavior. Our intelligence about human psychology may have been incomplete, but Krelvash was studying Sarah with new interest. This small human had accomplished something his own species, for all their size and power, had never managed. She had connected with the Vorthak on a level that transcended simple dominance hierarchies. The demonstration was about to begin, but its outcome was no longer certain. Krelvash's finger hovered over the containment field controls, his confidence wavering for the first time in decades of diplomatic conquest. The scene before him defied everything the Zephyrian Dominion had learned about prey species behavior. Their psychological profiles indicated that humans would either flee in terror or attempt futile aggressive displays when faced with a Vorthak. Instead, this human female had established some form of communication with their most prized predator. Supreme Alpha, Thexnari urged quietly. Perhaps we should reconsider the demonstration. The Vorthak's behavior is highly irregular. No, Krelvash growled, his pride overriding his growing unease. We will not be deterred by one anomalous interaction. The creature remains the deadliest predator in known space, and this human is still merely prey. His finger moved toward the control panel. The demonstration proceeds. Sarah sensed the tension building behind her but kept her focus on the magnificent creature before her. The Vorthak had remained in its relaxed position, but she could see its muscles subtly tensing as it detected the emotional changes in its handlers. These creatures were clearly empathic, reading the mood and intentions of those around them with supernatural accuracy. "Easy, beautiful," she whispered. "Whatever happens, remember that not everyone here sees you as just a weapon." The containment field flickered and died. The moment the energy barrier disappeared, every Zephyrian except Krelvash took an involuntary step backward. They had witnessed Vorthak releases before, knew the explosive violence that typically followed. The creature would assess its surroundings in milliseconds, identify the most vulnerable target, and strike with lethal precision. But the Vorthak didn't move. Instead, the massive predator remained in its lying position, its glowing eyes fixed on Sarah with an expression that seemed almost questioning. Its head tilted slightly, as if asking what she expected of it now that the barriers between them had been removed. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain still. This was the crucial moment, the point where her theory about interspecies communication would either prove valid or result in her death. She kept her hand extended, maintaining the same posture she had held while the creature was contained. "Hello there," she said softly. "You're free now. What would you like to do?" The Vorthak's response defied every prediction the Zephyrians had made. The creature rose slowly to its feet, movements deliberate and non-threatening. It approached Sarah with the careful gait of an animal choosing to interact rather than hunt. When it reached her, instead of attacking, it pressed its massive head gently against her outstretched palm. The contact sent a shock through both species present. Sarah felt the warmth and softness of the creature's fur, detected the subtle vibrations of that purring sound emanating from deep within its chest. The Vorthak closed its eyes momentarily, seeming to savor the first gentle touch it had experienced since being taken from its homeworld. "This is impossible," Thexnari breathed. "Vorthaks don't form attachments to non-pack members. They certainly don't seek physical contact with prey species." But Krelvash was beginning to understand something that chilled him more than any military threat ever had. "She's not prey to it," he said slowly. "Somehow this human has been accepted as pack." Sarah continued to gently stroke the Vorthak's massive head, marveling at the trust the creature was displaying. Its fur was incredibly soft despite its fearsome appearance, and she could feel the intelligence behind its eyes as it studied her face. This close, she could see that its glowing eyes were actually filled with tiny bioluminescent flecks that shifted and swirled like captured starlight. "You're not just a predator, are you?" she murmured. "You're a person, different from humans, different from the Zephyrians, but a person nonetheless with your own thoughts and feelings and needs." The great creature pressed closer, and Sarah was struck by a sudden realization. The Vorthak wasn't just accepting her presence, it was seeking comfort. This magnificent predator, capable of single-handedly hunting creatures many times its size, was lonely. It had been isolated from its own kind, used as a tool rather than treated as a sentient being. "Your people," Sarah said, turning to address Krelvash while keeping one hand on the Vorthak. "How long has this individual been separated from its pack?" The ambassador's multiple arms fidgeted with obvious discomfort. "Pack separation is necessary for military conditioning. Vorthaks in groups become difficult to control." "How long?" Sarah repeated, her voice carrying a note of steel that surprised everyone present. "Since juvenile stage," Thexnari answered when her superior remained silent. "Approximately 15 of your years." Sarah's expression hardened. "You took a social creature away from its family as a child and kept it isolated for 15 years, then wondered why it seemed so dangerous and unpredictable." The Vorthak seemed to sense the tension in her voice and pressed closer, offering what appeared to be comfort. Its massive head nuzzled against her shoulder, and she could feel the controlled strength in every movement. This creature could tear her apart without effort, yet it was choosing to offer gentle reassurance. "On Earth," Sarah continued, "we learned that predators separated from their social structures often become unstable and aggressive. But this isn't natural aggression, it's trauma response. You've been torturing this creature for over a decade and calling it military conditioning." The accusation hung in the air like a physical force. The Zephyrians prided themselves on their mastery of other species, but they had never considered that their methods might be fundamentally flawed. Their entire philosophy was built on dominance hierarchies and the subjugation of perceived lesser beings. Krelvash stepped forward, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with agitation. Your sentimentality clouds your judgment, human. The Vorthak is a weapon bred and trained for warfare. Its feelings, if they exist, are irrelevant to its function. The great creature's head lifted at the ambassador's harsh tone, and for the first time since the containment field had been deactivated, it showed signs of its legendary aggressiveness. Its lips pulled back slightly, revealing fangs that gleamed like polished ivory, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. But the threat wasn't directed at Sarah. It was focused entirely on Krelvash. The Zephyrian ambassador took an involuntary step backward, his own predatory instincts recognizing a challenge from an apex predator. The Vorthak was no longer the controlled weapon he had expected to demonstrate. It had chosen sides, and it had not chosen the Zephyrians. Sarah placed her other hand on the creature's flank, feeling the tension in its powerful muscles. "Easy," she whispered. "I know you don't like how he speaks, but violence isn't the answer here." Remarkably, the Vorthak responded to her calming influence, though it continued to watch Krelvash with obvious distrust. The message was clear. It would tolerate the ambassador's presence for Sarah's sake, but any threat to her would be met with lethal force. The demonstration had backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving human vulnerability, it had revealed the possibility of something the Zephyrian Dominion had never encountered: genuine interspecies partnership based on mutual respect rather than domination. The standoff in Central Park had transformed into something none of the participants had anticipated. What began as a demonstration of Zephyrian superiority had become a revelation about the nature of interspecies relationships. Sarah continued to maintain physical contact with the Vorthak, feeling the gradual relaxation of its muscles as it settled into a protective stance beside her. "I think we need to reconsider the terms of this meeting," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was occurring. "You came here expecting to negotiate from a position of strength, but you've revealed something far more valuable than military power." Krelvash's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. "And what might that be, human?" "Proof that your understanding of predator psychology is fundamentally flawed," Sarah replied. "This beautiful creature isn't responding to me because I've dominated it. It's responding because I've offered it something you never have: recognition of its inherent worth as an individual." The Vorthak's head turned toward her at the sound of her voice, and she noticed something remarkable in its expression. The alien predator was actually listening to the conversation, following the exchange between the humans and Zephyrians with obvious intelligence. Its ears swiveled to track each speaker, and its eyes showed a depth of understanding that went far beyond simple animal instinct. "You understand what we're discussing, don't you?" Sarah asked the creature directly. "You know this is about more than just you and me." The great predator's response was subtle but unmistakable. It lowered its head in what could only be described as a nod, then fixed its glowing gaze on Krelvash with an expression that seemed almost disappointed. Thexnari stepped forward, her voice tight with confusion. The intelligence report suggested this species was incapable of forming complex emotional bonds. Our xenobiologists concluded that humans were too weak to survive first contact with genuine predators. "Your xenobiologists were looking at the wrong variables," Sarah replied. "They studied fear responses and dominance behaviors, but they missed the most important factor: empathy. Humans didn't survive on Earth by being the strongest predators. We survived by learning to form alliances, even with species very different from ourselves." She gestured toward the Vorthak, who had now settled into a sitting position beside her, its massive frame radiating calm contentment despite the tension surrounding them. "This individual has been starved for genuine social connection for 15 years. When offered real recognition and respect, it responded exactly as any intelligent social creature would, with trust and reciprocal protection." The implications of her words struck the Zephyrian delegation like a physical blow. Their entire approach to interspecies relations was built on the assumption that only dominance and fear could control other beings. The possibility that cooperation might be more effective challenged everything they believed about their place in the galaxy. Krelvash's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, betraying his inner turmoil. "Even if your assessment is correct, it changes nothing. The Zephyrian Dominion has conquered hundreds of worlds through superior military force. One anomalous interaction cannot overturn centuries of successful expansion. But Sarah was studying the ambassador's body language, noting the subtle signs of uncertainty in his posture. How many of those conquered worlds have remained truly loyal to your dominion? How many require constant military oversight to prevent rebellion? The question hit its mark. Krelvash's jaw tightened and Thexnari looked away uncomfortably. The truth was that most Zephyrian territories required significant military presence to maintain order. Subject species complied through fear, but they never truly embraced Zephyrian rule. Our methods are effective, Krelvash insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Effective at maintaining control through force, Sarah agreed. But imagine what you could accomplish through genuine partnership. Think about the scientific advances, the cultural exchange, the technological innovations that could emerge from voluntary cooperation rather than forced subjugation. The Vorthak seemed to sense the shift in the conversation's tone and moved closer to Sarah, pressing its flank against her side. The gesture was clearly protective, but it also demonstrated something profound. The creature had chosen to align itself with the human rather than its lifelong handlers. This is what partnership looks like, Sarah said, placing both hands on the Vorthak's side. Not one species dominating another, but two different forms of intelligence choosing to work together for mutual benefit. As if to emphasize her point, the great predator turned its head toward her and made a soft, chuffing sound that seemed almost conversational. Sarah responded by gently scratching behind its ears, and the creature's eyes half closed in obvious pleasure. Remarkable, Thexnari whispered. In all our years of working with Vorthaks, we never observed such behavior. They responded to commands and conditioning, but never showed signs of enjoyment. Because you never treated them as partners, Sarah explained. You saw them as tools to be used rather than individuals to be respected. This one isn't just responding to my touch. It's experiencing genuine affection for the first time in its adult life. The emotional weight of that statement settled over the group like a heavy blanket. The Vorthak, for all its fearsome capabilities, was essentially a traumatized individual that had been deprived of normal social development. Its aggressive reputation wasn't a reflection of its true nature, but a result of systematic isolation and conditioning. Krelvash watched the interaction between human and Vorthak with growing fascination and unease. In his mind, he was rapidly recalculating everything he thought he knew about human psychology and capabilities. A species that could form instant bonds with apex predators was far more dangerous than one that simply possessed advanced weapons technology. Your proposal interests us, he said finally, his tone more respectful than it had been at the beginning of the encounter. But the Zephyrian Dominion does not simply abandon successful strategies without compelling evidence of alternatives. Sarah smiled, sensing an opportunity. Then allow me to propose a test. Give me time to work with your Vorthak. Not to control it, but to help it heal from its isolation trauma. If genuine partnership proves more effective than forced conditioning, perhaps we can discuss new approaches to interspecies relations. The suggestion sparked immediate debate among the Zephyrians. The idea of allowing an alien to work with their most prized military asset was unprecedented. But the results they had already witnessed were equally unprecedented. The risk is considerable, Thexnari pointed out. If the human damages our Vorthak's conditioning, it could become completely uncontrollable. Or it could become something far more valuable than a weapon, Sarah countered. It could become a true partner, fighting not because it's forced to, but because it chooses to protect those it cares about. The Vorthak lifted its head at her words, fixing its starlight eyes on her face with an expression that seemed to hold profound understanding. In that moment, it wasn't a fearsome predator or a military asset. It was simply an intelligent being recognizing the possibility of genuine friendship. The choice now lay with the Zephyrians. Maintain their traditional methods of dominance and control, or risk everything on the revolutionary concept that cooperation might be stronger than conquest. After 3 hours of heated debate among the Zephyrian delegation, conducted in their native language while Sarah waited patiently with the Vorthak, Krelvash finally approached with his decision. The great predator had spent the time either resting against Sarah's side or engaging in what could only be described as play behavior, gentle, mock stalking of falling leaves and investigative sniffing of her belongings. The Dominion Council has reached a consensus, Krelvash announced, his tone carefully neutral. We will permit your experiment, but under strict conditions. You will have 30 of your days to demonstrate the effectiveness of your partnership approach. The Vorthak will remain on your world during this period, but under constant monitoring. Sarah nodded, having expected such restrictions. What happens at the end of 30 days? If your methods prove superior to our conditioning protocols, we will consider renegotiating our expansion policies toward your species and others. If they fail, he paused meaningfully, then humanity will face the full might of the Zephyrian war fleet, and this world will be integrated into our dominion through conventional means. The stakes couldn't be higher. Sarah was essentially betting the freedom of her entire species on her ability to help one traumatized alien predator. The Vorthak seemed to sense the gravity of the moment and pressed closer to her, offering silent support. I accept your terms, Sarah said firmly, but I have conditions of my own. During these 30 days, the Vorthak stays with me, not in some laboratory or containment facility. If we're testing the partnership model, it needs to experience what genuine care and respect feel like. Texnari looked skeptical. You would take an apex predator into your dwelling? Live alongside a creature capable of killing you without effort? I've done it before, Sarah replied with a slight smile. Every human who's ever shared their home with a large dog has made the same choice. Trust is the foundation of true partnership. The next week proved challenging for everyone involved. The Zephyrians had established a monitoring station in a building overlooking Sarah's apartment, using advanced sensors to track every interaction between human and Vorthak. Their scientists were baffled by what they observed. The Vorthak, who they had designated as specimen VTK-7, but whom Sarah had begun calling Starlight after its beautiful eyes, displayed behavior patterns that defied every prediction in their behavioral models. Instead of establishing dominance over its human host, it seemed to defer to her judgment in unfamiliar situations. When Sarah worked at her computer, Starlight would lie nearby, occasionally lifting its head to watch her but never interfering. More remarkably, the great predator began showing signs of emotional healing. Its stress indicators, monitored through biometric sensors, decreased dramatically. It started engaging in normal grooming behaviors that it had abandoned during its years of isolation. Most surprisingly, it began to vocalize. Not the aggressive growls and roars the Zephyrians were familiar with, but soft chuffs, whines, and even what sounded like attempts to mimic human speech patterns. Sarah, it said one evening, the word emerging as a rumbling approximation that sent chills through everyone monitoring the feed. Dr. Martinez, a fellow xenobiologist who had been brought in to assist with the project, stared at the audio readouts in amazement. It's trying to learn her name. The vocal apparatus is completely different from ours, but it's definitely attempting communication. Sarah herself was moved to tears by the achievement. She had suspected that Starlight was far more intelligent than the Zephyrians realized, but hearing it attempt human speech confirmed that they were dealing with a truly sentient being, not just a clever predator. As the days passed, their bond deepened in ways that surprised even Sarah. Starlight seemed to understand her moods and would offer comfort when she was stressed about the mounting pressure of the experiment. When she fell asleep while working late one night, she woke to find the massive predator had carefully arranged itself as a living barrier between her and the door, protecting her in her vulnerability. The Zephyrians, meanwhile, were struggling to process what they were witnessing. Their military advisors insisted that the Vorthak's behavior was an elaborate deception, that it was merely waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But their xenobiologists were beginning to reach different conclusions. The stress hormone levels have dropped by 90%, Dr. Zenkala reported to Krelvash during their daily briefing. Neural activity patterns suggest the specimen is experiencing states we've never observed before, what the human literature describes as contentment and joy. Krelvash's claws clicked against his chair's armrests. Emotions are irrelevant. What matters is combat effectiveness.
Has the creature's hunting ability been compromised?
That's where the data becomes truly extraordinary, Zenkala continued, pulling up holographic displays of Starlight's recent activities. Yesterday, when Dr. Chen took the specimen to what humans call Central Park for exercise, it demonstrated hunting behaviors that exceed our previous measurements by 30%. But here's the remarkable part. It was hunting in coordination with her instructions, not despite them. The footage showed Sarah directing Starlight through various exercises using hand signals and verbal commands. The great predator responded with precision and obvious enthusiasm, its movements flowing like liquid mercury as it pursued targets and navigated obstacles. Most impressively, it consistently returned to Sarah's side after each exercise, seeking approval and physical affection. "This is partnership hunting," Thexnari observed, her scientific mind racing to process the implications. The specimen isn't just following commands, it's actively collaborating with the human. Its performance has improved because it wants to please her, not because it fears punishment. But the most significant breakthrough came during the third week, when an unexpected incident tested the true nature of the human-Vorthak bond. Sarah had taken Starlight to a nearby park for their daily exercise routine when they encountered a group of aggressive individuals who had been drinking heavily. The humans didn't recognize the alien predator and mistook Starlight for some kind of exotic pet. "Hey, lady," one of them called out, swaggering toward them with obvious hostile intent. "That's one ugly dog you got there. Maybe we should put it out of its misery." Sarah immediately positioned herself between Starlight and the approaching threat, but she could feel the great predator's muscles tensing behind her. Every instinct the creature possessed was telling it to eliminate the threat to its chosen pack member. Its lips pulled back slightly, revealing those crystalline fangs, and a low growl rumbled from deep in its chest. "Easy, Starlight," Sarah said quietly, not taking her eyes off the approaching humans. "I know you want to protect me, but these people don't understand what they're dealing with. Violence would only prove the Zephyrians right about us." The drunk humans continued their advance, encouraged by what they perceived as submission. One of them reached for Sarah's shoulder, intending to push her aside so they could get at her pet. What happened next demonstrated the true depth of the partnership that had developed between human and alien predator. Instead of attacking immediately, Starlight moved with fluid grace to place itself between Sarah and the threat. It rose to its full height, nearly 9 feet of pure predator, and fixed the approaching humans with eyes that blazed like captured stars. The effect was immediate and absolute. The humans' primitive brainstems recognized the presence of an apex predator and flooded their systems with terror. They stumbled backward, suddenly sober, their aggressive posturing replaced by primal fear. But Starlight didn't attack. Instead, it maintained its protective stance until the humans had fled, then immediately turned to Sarah with an expression that clearly asked if she was unharmed. The great predator had chosen restraint over violence, protection over destruction. "Good choice, beautiful," Sarah whispered, running her hands through Starlight's fur. "You could have hurt them, but you chose the better path. I'm proud of you." The monitoring Zephyrians were stunned. Their behavioral models predicted that a Vorthak faced with a threat to its pack member would respond with immediate lethal force. The concept of a predator choosing restraint when violence was an option was completely outside their understanding. The specimen demonstrated perfect threat assessment and proportional response, Dr. Zenkala reported later. It neutralized the threat without causing harm to the aggressors. This level of judgment and self-control is unprecedented in our experience. As the 30-day deadline approached, even the most skeptical Zephyrians had to admit that something extraordinary was happening. Starlight wasn't becoming less of a predator through its partnership with Sarah. It was becoming a more complete and capable individual. The isolation and trauma that had defined its existence were healing, revealing the intelligent, emotionally complex being that had always existed beneath the conditioning. The question now was whether the Zephyrian leadership would be willing to acknowledge that their fundamental approach to interspecies relations might be flawed, or whether pride and tradition would prevent them from embracing a revolutionary new paradigm. On the 28th day of the experiment, Krelvash made an announcement that sent shockwaves through both the Zephyrian monitoring team and Sarah's support group. Standing in the temporary command center overlooking her apartment, the ambassador's forearms gestured toward the displays showing Starlight's remarkable transformation. "The Dominion Council has reviewed our reports," he began, his voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty. "They are intrigued by the results but demand a final demonstration before reaching any conclusions about policy changes." Dr. Chen looked up from where she sat beside Starlight, who had taken to resting his massive head in her lap while she worked on her reports. The great predator's eyes opened at the sound of the ambassador's voice, but he remained relaxed, trusting Sarah to handle whatever was coming. "What kind of demonstration?" she asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. Thexnari stepped forward, her expression apologetic but determined. "The Council wishes to test the ultimate limits of your partnership bond. Tomorrow we will release a second Vorthak, one that has undergone traditional conditioning and remains at peak aggressive programming." Sarah's blood ran cold. "You want to pit Starlight against another of his kind?" "Not exactly," Krelvash replied. "The conditioned Vorthak will be programmed to target you specifically. The test is whether your partner will defend you against its own kind, and more importantly, whether it can do so without reverting to its original violent conditioning." The implications were staggering. Sarah would be placing her life in the hands of a creature she had known for less than a month, betting everything on the bond they had formed. Worse, Starlight would be forced to fight another member of his species, something that went against every social instinct these pack-oriented creatures possessed. "This is barbaric." Dr. Martinez protested from the monitoring station. "You're essentially forcing a traumatized individual to choose between protecting his friend and harming his own kind." But Sarah was studying Starlight's reaction to the conversation. The great predator had lifted his head and was watching the exchange with obvious intelligence. His ears were forward, alert but not aggressive, and she could see him processing the emotional undertones of the discussion. "Starlight understands what you're proposing," she said quietly. "Don't you, beautiful? They want to test whether you'll fight to protect me." The Vorthak's response was subtle but unmistakable. He rose to his feet and moved to stand beside her chair, pressing his flank against her side in a gesture that had become their signal for mutual support. His eyes found Krelvash across the room, and for a moment, Predator stared at Predator with perfect understanding. "Your specimen accepts the challenge," Thexnari observed with scientific detachment. "He's not a specimen," Sarah said firmly. "He's Starlight, and he's making a choice to stand with me. But I want something in return for agreeing to this test." Krelvash's head tilted with interest. "State your terms." "If Starlight and I pass your test, if we prove that partnership is stronger than conditioning, then you don't just reconsider your policies toward humanity. You begin the process of rehabilitating every Vorthak in your military service. These creatures deserve the chance to heal from their trauma and choose their own paths." The demand struck at the heart of Zephyrian military doctrine. Their entire war machine was built on the use of conditioned Vorthaks as shock troops. Agreeing to Sarah's terms would mean abandoning centuries of military tradition. The Council would never approve such extensive changes based on a single demonstration. Krelvash protested. "Then make sure they understand what they're really seeing tomorrow," Sarah replied. "This isn't just about one human and one Vorthak. It's about proving that voluntary cooperation is more powerful than forced compliance." That night, Sarah lay awake in her bed with Starlight curled protectively on the floor beside her. The great predator's breathing was slow and steady, but she could sense his alertness. He knew tomorrow would bring danger, and every instinct he possessed was focused on preparing for it. "I'm scared," she whispered into the darkness. "Not just for me, but for you. I don't want you to have to hurt another of your kind." Starlight's head lifted, and in the dim light she could see his starlit eyes regarding her with infinite gentleness. He rose quietly and padded over to her bedside, resting his massive head on her mattress. When she reached out to stroke his fur, he made that soft chuffing sound that had become his way of expressing affection. "You're not just protecting me tomorrow," she realized aloud. "You're protecting the possibility of a different future for your entire species. That's a lot of pressure for anyone to carry." But Starlight seemed untroubled by the weight of responsibility. He had spent 15 years in isolation, treated as nothing more than a weapon. Now he had experienced genuine friendship, respect, and care. If fighting tomorrow meant preserving that possibility for others like him, he was ready to make that sacrifice. The next morning dawned gray and cold. The demonstration was to take place in the same Central Park clearing where their first meeting had occurred, but now the area was surrounded by Zephyrian monitoring equipment and security personnel. Sarah and Starlight arrived together, walking side by side with the easy companionship that had developed between them. The second Vorthak was already there, contained within a transport unit that hummed with restraint fields. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the difference between this creature and Starlight. Its posture was rigid with artificial aggression, its eyes burned with conditioned hatred, and its entire body vibrated with barely contained violence. This was what Starlight might have become if not for their intervention. The conditioning protocol for this specimen is absolute, Dr. Zankala explained, as the monitoring team prepared their equipment. It will target you exclusively and continue attacking until either you are dead or it is incapacitated. There is no recall command, no safety override. Sarah nodded grimly, then knelt beside Starlight and took his massive head in her hands. Listen to me, beautiful. I know this goes against every instinct you have. Fighting your own kind is wrong, and I would never ask you to do it under normal circumstances. But this isn't normal. That creature in there isn't really making its own choices anymore. The Zephyrians broke something inside it, and now it's driven by artificial hatred rather than natural behavior. Starlight's eyes met hers, and she saw understanding there. He knew the difference between choosing to fight and being forced to fight. More importantly, he understood that sometimes fighting was necessary to protect what mattered most. If you can find a way to stop it without killing it, please try, Sarah continued. But if it comes down to a choice between its life and mine, you choose mine. Do you understand? I can't ask you to die for me, but I won't let you sacrifice yourself out of misguided compassion either. The great predator pressed his forehead against hers, in a gesture that had become their most intimate expression of trust. Then he stepped back and positioned himself between her and the transport unit, ready to face whatever emerged. Krelvash raised his hand toward the containment controls. The final test begins now. May the strongest bond prevail. The containment field dissolved with a sound like breaking glass, and the conditioned Vorthak exploded from its transport unit with terrifying velocity. Unlike Starlight's measured movements, this creature moved with the mechanical precision of a living weapon. Its eyes blazed with artificial fury as they locked onto Sarah, and its lips pulled back to reveal fangs that gleamed with surgical implants designed to enhance their lethality. Sarah forced herself to remain still as death incarnate charged toward her across the grass. Every human instinct screamed at her to run, but she knew that fleeing would only trigger the creature's pursuit programming more intensely. Instead, she trusted in the bond she had built with Starlight and waited for him to act. The collision between the two Vorthaks was like watching forces of nature clash. Starlight intercepted his conditioned counterpart mere feet from Sarah, their impact sending shockwaves through the ground. But where the monitoring Zephyrians expected to see two predators locked in savage combat, they witnessed something far more complex. Starlight wasn't fighting with the mindless aggression they associated with Vorthak combat. Instead, he moved with tactical intelligence, using his knowledge of his opponent's conditioning against it. When the other creature lunged with programmed fury, Starlight sidestepped and redirected its momentum, sending it tumbling past its target. When it recovered and charged again, he didn't meet force with force but instead used leverage and timing to neutralize its attacks. He's not trying to kill it, Dr. Martinez observed from the monitoring station. He's trying to wear it down without causing permanent damage. But the conditioned Vorthak's programming wouldn't allow it to be deterred. Each failed attack only intensified its aggression, and its surgical enhancements gave it advantages that Starlight lacked. Razor-sharp claw extensions and reinforced bone structure made it a more efficient killer than nature had ever intended. During the fourth exchange, the creature managed to rake its claws across Starlight's flank, drawing silver blood that steamed in the cold air. Sarah gasped and started forward instinctively, but Starlight's warning growl stopped her. He couldn't protect her and fight simultaneously if she moved from her position. The scent of blood seemed to drive the conditioned creature into an even greater frenzy. It pressed its attack with renewed violence, and for the first time, Starlight was forced to respond with serious aggression. His own claws found their mark, leaving deep gouges in his opponent's shoulder, but the conditioned Vorthak barely seemed to notice the injury. The conditioning has overridden its pain responses, Thexnari reported with clinical detachment. It will continue fighting until it achieves its objective or suffers critical system failure. But something unexpected was happening. As the battle continued, the conditioned creature's movements began to show signs of confusion. Starlight's responses didn't match its programmed expectations. Instead of the mindless aggression it was designed to counter, it faced an opponent who fought with purpose and restraint, who seemed to be trying to communicate even as they battled. During a brief pause in the combat, as both creatures circled each other with bared fangs, Starlight did something that stunned everyone present. He began to vocalize, not the roars and growls of combat, but the complex harmonic patterns that Vorthax used for pack communication. He was trying to reach whatever remained of the natural creature buried beneath layers of conditioning. The effect on his opponent was immediate and dramatic. The conditioned Vorthax stumbled mid-stride, its artificial fury flickering as deeply buried memories responded to sounds it hadn't heard since juvenile separation. For a moment, its eyes lost their programmed focus and showed something that might have been recognition. Impossible, Krelvash breathed. The conditioning is absolute. Natural behavior should have been completely suppressed. But Starlight continued his vocalizations, weaving patterns of sound that spoke of pack bonds, shared hunts, and the companionship that defined healthy Vorthax society. With each harmonic phrase, the conditioned creature seemed to struggle more with its programming. Torn between artificial directives and awakening natural instincts, Sarah understood what Starlight was attempting and felt her heart break for both creatures. He wasn't just fighting to protect her, he was fighting to save his opponent from the prison of its own conditioning. The great predator was offering something the Zephyrians never had: the possibility of remembering what it meant to be genuinely alive. The internal conflict within the conditioned Vorthax reached a critical point. It stopped its attack entirely and stood motionless in the center of the clearing, its whole body trembling as natural impulses warred with artificial programming. Its eyes flickered between Sarah and Starlight, confusion replacing the mechanical hatred that had driven it moments before. Starlight approached slowly, still vocalizing in those complex harmonic patterns. When he reached his opponent, he did something that defied every combat protocol in Zephyrian military doctrine. He lowered his head and exposed his throat in a gesture of trust and invitation to peaceful resolution. The response was immediate. The conditioned creature's artificial aggression collapsed entirely as suppressed social instincts flooded back to consciousness. It returned Starlight's gesture, then pressed its head against his in the traditional Vorthax greeting between pack members. The sound it made wasn't a roar of fury but a keening cry of grief for all the years of lost connection. Sarah found herself weeping openly as she watched the reunion between two creatures who had been separated by more than distance. They had been divided by the systematic destruction of their natural social bonds. Now, through Starlight's courage and compassion, both were beginning to remember what they had lost. The implications rippled through the Zephyrian monitoring team like seismic shocks. Their most advanced conditioning protocols had been undone not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by the simple offer of genuine connection. The supposedly irreversible programming had crumbled in the face of authentic care and recognition. "The demonstration is complete," Sarah said, walking slowly toward the two Vorthax who now stood together, grooming each other's wounds with gentle care. "You have your proof that partnership is stronger than conditioning, that cooperation is more powerful than control." Krelvash stared at the scene before him, his entire worldview shifting in real time. Everything the Zephyrian Dominion had built was based on the assumption that only dominance could create reliable relationships between species. But here was undeniable evidence that voluntary bonds could not only match but exceed the effectiveness of forced compliance. "The Council must see this," he said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of revolutionary realization. "Every Vorthax in our military service, every conditioned creature in our dominion, they could all be offered this choice." Sarah nodded, still keeping her distance as the two predators continued their reunion. "It won't be easy. Some conditioning runs too deep to reverse completely, but every individual deserves the chance to remember who they were before they became weapons." As if responding to her words, both Vorthax turned toward her. The newly liberated creature approached cautiously, its movements uncertain but curious. When it reached her, it followed Starlight's example and lowered its massive head in a gesture that clearly requested the same gentle contact that had begun her partner's healing. Sarah reached out slowly, her hand trembling with emotion as she touched the creature's scarred fur. "Hello there," she whispered. "Welcome back to being yourself." The sound that emerged from the creature's throat was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever recorded. pure joy mixed with profound relief, the voice of an individual discovering that they were more than the sum of their conditioning. 3 months later, the first Vorthak Rehabilitation Center opened on the Zephyrian homeworld. Volunteers from dozens of species, trained in the partnership methods developed by Sarah and her team, worked to help conditioned creatures rediscover their natural social behaviors. Not all could be saved. Some had been too damaged by years of isolation and programming, but many found their way back to genuine life. The Zephyrian Dominion didn't collapse overnight, but it began the slow transformation from an empire built on conquest to a confederation based on voluntary cooperation. The process would take generations and wouldn't always be smooth, but the example of one human and one Vorthak choosing trust over fear had planted seeds of change that would eventually reshape the galaxy. Starlight never returned to military service. Instead, he became an ambassador in his own right, working alongside Sarah to help other species understand that the strongest bonds weren't forged through dominance, but through mutual respect and genuine care. Together, they proved that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't conquest or resistance, but simply choosing to see the person behind the predator and offering them the chance to choose friendship over fear.